In Secrets of the Lost Liners Series 2, I really wanted to cover some other ships that perhaps not many people may remember or have heard about, but that have some really fascinating stories to tell beyond how they were lost. And one of those was the Ile De France. The Ile De France was very famous in her time for many reasons, and she was the first ocean liner after the First World War that went out to sea that was completely decorated and fitted out in the Art Deco style of the time. She was a French ship, and she became incredibly popular with the rich and the wealthy and the famous that would travel on her between Europe and North America. Of course, James Cameron's film Titanic was famous for the fact that the director built this huge ship, a giant set, in a purpose-built water tank and slowly sunk the ship in front of the cameras. But what most people don't know is that 3 decades before, in the 1960s, there was an equally ambitious film producer called Andrew Stone and his wife Virginia Stone, who actually set out to do the same thing. But they actually took a real ocean liner, the Ile De France, on her retirement, took her out to sea. They set about actually destroying the ship and attempted to sink her as part of this disaster film that they were producing at the time, called The Last Voyage. What I think is fascinating about this story is the cat and mouse game that Andrew Stone and his wife played with the owners of the ship, French Line, who had sold the Ile De France to a scrapyard in Japan, who didn't want anything to do with their ship being used in what they saw as a tacky disaster film. And it's interesting the analysis that we follow, which cover the seemingly bigger dramas behind the camera than actually in front of them during the making of this disaster film, which used the Ile De France as the biggest floating prop ever used in a movie. The Ile De France had a very long and colourful and complicated life at sea. Ile De France was instrumental in some breathtaking sea rescues, not just saving merchant seamen from stricken vessels, but most famously the hundreds of passengers she fished out of the freezing Atlantic waters from the stricken liner, the Andrea Doria. She was embroiled in incidents in the Second World War where Adolf Hitler was trying to get his hands on this French ship, where the British, on the other hand, wanted to get the ship for their own ends. Of course, Hitler in this time had actually invaded France. Should the crew of this luxury liner sail their ship back to their home country now occupied by the Nazis, or outwit German spies and deadly U-boats and bring the ship to the hands of the Allies? She might not be the most famous ocean liner in the world, but she's had one of the most colourful, dramatic, adventurous and exciting lives at sea, and she had the most spectacular end to her life, all captured on 35mm film for the disaster film The Last Voyage.